All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Shelly Del Rosario, Director of Events over here at Appspace. Thanks for joining us today. We have a lot of really interesting insights to get into from our guest speaker today, Andrew Hewitt from Forrester. Before we do, let me address a few logistics about the webinar. First, we've gone ahead and muted all of your lines for you. You should be able to hear me from your speakers. If you are having some technical challenges with your audio, you can call in and use the access code and the webinar ID on your screen. I imagine you'll have a lot of questions for us as we go through the presentation today. So when you do, please pop them into the chat box on the bottom, it should be at the bottom hand of your screen, and we'll address them during the Q&A at the end. And if we aren't able to cover your question during our call today, we'll be sure to reach out to you afterwards. And then you'll also receive an email shortly after the webinar. There's a link to the survey in that email. Please take the survey. Your feedback is important in our continuous effort to deliver content that matters to you. And lastly, a question we get asked a lot. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you in the next few days. So here's a quick overview of our agenda today. We'll go through some welcome and introductions, and then we'll get into key trends in hybrid working, followed by employee engagement and hybrid work. And then we'll end with best practice. And then we'll have our Q&A portion at the very end. And so with that, I'm pleased to introduce to you our speakers today. Thomas, our EVP of Product Experience here at Appspace, and Andrew Hewitt, Senior Analyst with Forrester Research, who brings with him a wealth of knowledge on the topic at hand, as well as expertise in our industry. So Thomas and Andrew, are you ready to jump in?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Oh, good, perfect.
Awesome. So thanks, Shelly. I really appreciate the introduction, and great to be doing this webinar today with you, Thomas. And welcome everybody to the webinar that we have today on hot trends in hybrid working. Just a little bit about myself before we jump in. I'm a senior analyst here at Forrester, as Shelly mentioned, and I've been covering remote work and kind of hybrid working for actually since 2017. So even prior to the pandemic and this move to remote work en masse, I've been covering this for quite a number of years, and so excited to share with you some of the learnings that we've had at Forrester over the past 18 months or so, as we've all lived through this massive change. And as we go through this, we'll talk about what does that hybrid experience look like as you go forward into the end of 2021 and into 2022. And Thomas and I will have a discussion towards the end or the mid part of the webinar, and really go over some of the new technologies that we're seeing that are helping with hybrid working, as well as just some best practices here. So let's get started with just some of the key trends. I want to start off by just giving Forrester's overall viewpoint on the market. What are we seeing out there as far as hybrid working, remote working, back to office full time? And basically we think that there are going to be three different types of organizations, and I'll go through those three right now. The first is what we call a fully anywhere work organization. We think about 10% of organizations are going to operate in this manner. And just to give you a little context of what that means, anywhere work essentially means that pretty much every worker is a full-time remote worker. They may go into a centralized hub, maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months, something of that nature. But for all purposes, it's a fully remote company. Some of the examples of those right now are, a lot of high tech companies, Spotify, Dropbox were kind of examples that came out. GitHub has been one of the major ones over the past couple of years, and so forth. And so we think this will be a smaller percentage of the overall share here. There's going to also be 30% that we believe will be actually returning to the office full time here. And I'm just waiting for the slide to go forward here. There it is. Okay. So 30% we believe will go return to the office, basically returning to the way that it was, prior to the pandemic. We think a lot of these organizations out there are very focused on, building an in-office type of culture. They might have specific dependencies, that require a physical presence, like maybe a manufacturing floor or something of that nature that really requires that person to be on site. The vast majority, however, and this is the subject of today's webinar, are going to be in this hybrid scenario. So we think 60% of organizations are going to be hybrid. And just to give you a sense of the kinds of customers that we talk to at Forrester, we work with a lot of the Fortune 500, enterprises out there. And I spend a lot of my day working with them on kind of hybrid work strategies. And almost every single one of them that I've talked to does think they're going to have kind of a mix of in-person and remote workforce participants going forward. And so the challenge is, how do I sort of prepare for that from a cultural, technological perspective, from a governance perspective. And so we'll talk a lot about how to kind of optimize that hybrid work experience throughout the duration of the webinar. But I did want to give that 10-30-60 split that we see at Forrester as really occurring out there in the marketplace amongst those larger enterprises. So one of the major reasons that we are seeing this move to hybrid work, I think that there's oftentimes a sense that hybrid work is because organizations feel like they can't necessarily trust their employees in a full-time remote scenario, right? But actually, when you look at the data, 61% of employees themselves want that hybrid, some form of hybrid work experience, right? So right here, this is from a recent study that we just did, which actually had Appspace in it as well as a participant for that research. But we looked at this, and essentially most people do prefer, to be in the office and to be at home and kind of split that time. Most people are in that 2 to 3 days per week range. So it's not as if this is completely driven by HR and leadership as a, driving this hybrid work transition. It's actually, part of that employee demand as well. You can also see that there are about a quarter of folks out there that say, yes, I want to be fully remote every day of the week. And so we think that organizations are going to be trying to really manage that complexity of in-office and remote participants going forward. So some of the things that we are hearing out there is that a lot of organizations have made these investments in the office, and now they're starting to think about, okay, the employees want more flexibility going forward. How do I start thinking about that hybrid work experience? This quote that you see here on the screen, I won't read it in front of you, but this is from the CIO of a really large Japanese automobile manufacturer here, located in the US headquarters here. And what they had done, they had invested all in their office space. They had bought a bunch of digital whiteboards, had redesigned the entire office space, and now all of a sudden they have this pandemic, and they're going to have to figure out, okay, how do I make that experience equitable between the office and the at-home participants? And so this is a major area where they're really starting to think about preparing for that hybrid work now. And so this is happening across many of the large enterprises that we work with, some in manufacturing, financial services, government agencies. I'm really starting to think through, how do I make that experience location agnostic, essentially, from a technology perspective. And so we'll talk a lot about that technology piece today. One of the things that certainly is becoming increasingly clear is that this is going to pose some new challenges. What I like to say to our clients generally is, what we did last year with remote work was basically remote work on easy mode, right? When everybody is working remotely, you don't have a lot of the challenges that you have when you have this split workforce. And so I think we're going to go transition into more of a hard mode when we move towards hybrid working, where we have this split between some people that are going to be fully remote, some people in the office. And that's going to bring up a lot of new challenges around things like, one, safety. We'll talk a lot about that, just the return to office in general. Meetings, how do I run a meeting that's equitable, that gets everybody's opinion? Career advancement, a lot of the things that are challenging in traditional remote work environments are lack of recognition, lack of access to promotions, career development, because you're basically, out of sight, out of mind. What are those communication expectations if I have some people, coming into the office on Wednesday, others coming in on Friday? How am I structuring all of that, right? Office design is another area. One of the things that's becoming increasingly clear, we'll talk about this as well today, is you need to give people a reason to come back to the office. It needs to be better than the at-home experience if you want them to actually come in. And so Thomas is going to talk specifically a lot about some of the investments that Appspace is making around, making that experience really good for employees. Things like structured work styles. How do I, even, create a structure for determining who gets to work hybrid versus remote? Who do I force to come into the office every day? And of course, things like people management, right? I think a lot of leaders have had to change their style of management in the last year as they've started to manage this all remote workforce. A major challenge is, okay, now when people come back into the office, how do I keep that experience, remote first for my employees that report to me, that are working at home, and how do I not over advantage the people that might be coming in on a daily basis? So all of these are major challenges. We're going to focus a lot on the technology challenges and solutions as part of this webinar, but I did want to highlight that this is not just a technology problem, it's also a people, culture, governance challenge as well. And so when you think about your long-term strategy, make sure that you are thinking about this very holistically. And we'll give you some really good tips specifically on some of the technology pieces as well here. But I did want to just highlight that up front. So with that in place here, one of the things that we are seeing here is that technology is going to play a really significant role in the success of these programs going forward. So what you see here is a recent study that we just put up called Don't Miss Your Anywhere Work Opportunity. And what you're seeing here as a response from employees are those that agree that their organization, has invested significantly in technology resources for that employee experience, right? If they agree with that statement, here's what the impact of it is. So if let's say, for instance, that person agrees with that statement, they're actually 13 percentage points more likely to say employees are happy to work at my company. So there's higher levels of talent retention. 7% more likely to say, that they're scoring high in our employee experience index, which measures overall engagement. 12 percentage points more likely to say that their organization is able to adopt new technologies faster, and 10 percentage points more likely to say, their company is able to innovate very quickly. And so when you make that technology investment, it doesn't just have an impact on daily productivity, it also has these larger business outcome impacts of retention, higher levels of engagement, better innovation, and improved culture overall. And so I think that's one of the major learnings of the pandemic, is just how important technology is, not just to the day-to-day workings of employees, but the broader business goals that you're trying to drive. And so keep that in context as you start thinking about this and that return to work. What is the impact of those technologies on the broader business? Okay, so that gives you just a little bit of context as far as what we see are the major trends. Obviously, we're moving towards a hybrid work environment. We're going to transition now and talk about how do you maximize employee engagement in a hybrid work environment, specifically in the context of newer technologies and processes and so forth that you're going to need to develop to enable people to return to the office. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of some of the key categories that you need to think about for the return to work, give my perspective on each one of them, and Thomas is also going to jump in and give the Appspace perspective as well, so you get both the Forrester and the Appspace perspective in this section here. So the way that we've outlined this is that we believe that there are 5 keys to employee engagement in hybrid work here, and we basically created this hierarchy here. It's a little bit difficult to see on the screen with the coloring, but essentially it's a pyramid where the foundational components of driving engagement in the workplace are making sure people feel safe. From there, you go up to making sure that you're efficiently using the space, that people can be productive in that space, that they can collaborate with their colleagues in an effective way in that space, And then finally, you're driving inspiration and higher levels of culture in that space as well. And so if you think about this as kind of almost like a maturity model, you really want to think about, how am I doing across all of these different categories, and are there areas that I'm missing out on? And this can help give you some prioritization as well. If you're thinking, do I want to really focus on the collaborative tools, or do I need to focus on efficiency first? And so we think this hierarchy is a good way to really conceptualize those investments that you're making from a technology perspective. So let's jump into each of these here, and we'll get both the Forrester and the Appspace perspective. So from a safety point of view, one of the things that we are seeing in our surveys, and this is across almost every single country that we survey as part of our ongoing employee experience survey, is that anywhere between 60 and 75% of the workers in any given country, I think in the US it's about 66% of the workers, basically say, I don't feel safe coming back to work if the organization has not made investments in protecting my safety, whether that is having a vaccination requirement, whether that's having a social distancing in place, an assessment before you enter the office. And so a lot of the technologies that we're seeing out there today are really focused on understanding what that readiness is from an employee perspective when it comes to returning to work, and specifically with that focus on safety. And so a lot of the tools out there today will have various health attestation types of forms that you could go through and make sure that someone is feeling good on a day-to-day basis before they come into the office. We are seeing increased movement towards requiring vaccination for entry into the workplace as well. Particularly in markets outside of the United States. And so that continues to be a key technology piece that people are building into various tools, whether that's a desk reservation system or just kind of a standalone application that an employee might fill out. So there are a number of different tools that basically are focused on ensuring that you have that safety in place prior to bringing people back into the office. So Thomas, at this point, I'll hand it over to you and get your perspective here, and then we'll go on to the next pillar.
Learn to unmute myself. Thanks, Andrew.
No
right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if we look back 18 months, and if you can just move the slide forward for me, that'd be super helpful. If we look 18 months back, the requirements when we started talking to customers about the return to the office was nothing about having a vaccine certificate or even answering a COVID questionnaire. At first, it was really about, as an employee, do I need authorization? Do I have permission to come back into the office? And then as we moved further towards a return to the office, we started talking about signing off on a company safety etiquette, being a good citizen of the workplace and agreeing to respecting social distancing rules to keep colleagues safe and ourselves safe. And then the requirements kind of increase progressively, and they're constantly changing. The COVID questionnaire came around summer last year. That was becoming now a mandatory requirement for returning to the office. At that time, companies were thinking they were going back into the office before the end of the year, and then everything got pushed out. And now that we've vaccinated a large part of the population in many Western countries, we're at a stage where companies are considering requiring a COVID-19 vaccine certificate to get access to the building. We just saw in France, for example, the president announcing that you won't be going back to the office unless you have been vaccinated and you have a vaccine requirement. We call those at Appspace checkpoints. And as an administrator, depending on the country you're in, the state you're in, the local requirements or the company requirements, you'll be able to set the checkpoints during the user journey. From reserving your space into getting into the office, you may have different checkpoints that you need to comply to. So I think what's really important for companies is to think that we don't know yet what is going to happen in the next 6 months. So you need a tool that allows you to adjust and build those different checkpoints at different times of the user journey, depending on the new requirements that are occurring.
Absolutely. I think that idea of flexibility is really important with these tools, just because things are changing so quickly. Really like that perspective. Efficiency is another key area here as well. Some of the data here is actually pretty astounding as far as how much money organizations will spend on space. Even having a dedicated space for an employee dedicated desk can run anywhere between 20 US dollars per month, all the way up to something in the 80 to $90 if you're in a really high price real estate region. And so organizations are one, thinking about, okay, how much money am I spending on real estate, but also how do I maximize the space that I have, and realize how can I better use it in a different way. I mentioned up front that a lot of organizations are thinking about, how do I really make it compelling for people to come back? What do they have, or what could they get in the office if they were to come back that maybe they don't have at home? And that's that kind of collaboration experience, having open rooms, having whiteboards, all those types of things, right? And so trying to get a better understanding of how can I be more efficient with my space is another major area. And we're seeing a rise in a lot of tools to go out and measure, let's say, occupancy in different parts of the building. So you understand, what are your high traffic areas? What are the conference rooms that are being used very frequently? Which ones are not being used very frequently? And can that help me prioritize my investments? Some of that are, sensor-based types of technologies. Some of that is, mobile application-based. But there's a variety of different approaches to basically go and say, what space do I have out there today? And how can I better utilize that space going forward? One, so I can reduce some of the real estate costs that I'm off-putting by having more of a remote workforce. And two, better design that space and invest in new technologies to put in that space to make that experience really compelling for when people do come back to the office. Oops.
Yeah, it's interesting, Andrew, because if you think about it, pre-pandemic, companies were already thinking about maximizing real estate, right? Obviously, it's always been the bigger cost after labor, so you have to optimize that and to take care of it. But it was really more about optimizing the space to address the needs. The change here now is who gets to go back to the office? When do they get back to the office? How do they stay safe by respecting social distancing? A lot of companies see this return to the office as an opportunity to fast track a plan that they probably had on 5 years. They were thinking, okay, moving to a hoteling environment or hot desk environment is a long-term plan because it's a big cultural change. But this is an opportunity to implement that change because there is real value in it from a safety perspective and contact tracing perspective. So with this opportunity, we have also the requirements that have changed. It is now a lot about permissions, which users or groups of users may come to the office or get access to specific neighborhood of the building based on different time of the day or different days in the week and so forth. And then there's this concept of rules, which is very new in this space. And rules come in the concept of constraints and checkpoints. The constraint could be how long can I make a reservation for, or how many days in advance can I book a reservation, a space? What's the capacity that I want to assign to a neighborhood, a floor, a building? What's the minimum advance time in advance that I need to set for a user to be able to book that space? I think that has changed. We heard a lot of organization talk about group A going on Monday, group B going on Tuesday. Again, this is all new, and we consider those as rules, and they need to be, again, very flexible. And we think rules like checkpoints are going to change over time as companies understand and deal with the new reality. Now, with this, analytics is critical. Now, IWMS providers who manage really well real estate assets, attributes, were focused on managing and monitoring how the workspace is utilized, and sensors were very helpful in that concept. With the pandemic, we have to focus also on contact tracing. It's not only knowing someone is sitting at the desk, but who is sitting at the desk. When you know who's sitting at the desk, you can do two things. You can, of course, maintain safety and communicate accordingly when there's an issue. But you can also start doing cross-billing, which is interesting, charging departments based on their usage. So analytics is going to become even richer with tools like this that allow you to really monitor your users across the workplace, and being able to correlate that user data with the sensor-based data will then give you the full picture of how your workspace is utilized, and that should help companies go back to where we started 18 months ago, which was maximizing the real estate to operate at the right capacity.
On the productivity piece, this is the third piece of the overall pillar. What we are seeing here is the primary thing that we're getting asked about here at Forrester is desk reservation and hot desking applications. This has been one of the hottest technology areas that people have been asking about. Probably get in between 5 to 10 questions on this per week from a lot of our large enterprise clients, and a lot of this has to do with safety requirements. A lot of this has to do with efficiency, but a lot of it also has to do with just enabling people to be really productive when they come into the office by having them go reserve a desk, know exactly who's going to be there from their team and go and collaborate with them. And so this is one of the major areas that we are seeing organizations really focus on. And the desk booking is one component of this, which I think is mostly driven from that safety perspective. But there's also things like conference room booking that people are really looking to streamline. There's classic examples, right, of you may walk around your building and it may look as if every single room that you're trying to book is actually booked up and has a reservation, but there's nobody in any of those rooms. That's one of the major challenges that organizations are also trying to solve with these types of solutions, is give people a better booking experience for those conference rooms as well. And it's interesting. The hot desking thing was obviously something that's been around for quite some time. In the 90s, for instance, hot desking was something that was common in a lot of the large consultancies out there on a global basis. What's different now is that having this actual software to go and manage that hot desking experience is becoming a lot more paramount. It helps avoid some of the challenges that occur in a hot desking environment, sociological challenges in terms of people not necessarily booking the same desk every single day, sitting in the same area, coming in early so they can sit next to the boss. There are all sorts of sociological challenges with reservation-less hot desking. And so the major challenge today is, how do I get a tool that integrates with my existing technology portfolio and that also enables people to quickly learn that tool, get access to it, understand how it works. And then the second component of that is a lot of these tools will also have other capabilities too. Like maybe I want to book a conference room, but I want to know that that conference room has a whiteboard in it, or has a monitor in it, or has some other type of asset that can help me and my team be productive. And so these tools are expanding beyond just conference room booking and desk booking, and really looking at that workplace experience as well. So definitely look out for that as these tools continue to mature, is that it's not just about the desk booking, it's about that entire workplace experience when people are coming into the office, and really trying to make that a better experience for them going forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you think a year ago, no one was really focusing on desk reservation. This is very new. You had really small companies doing point products, but no one had adopted that at scale from a reservation. It was more the hot desking. So I just come and find an empty space, sit at it, and work for it for the day. I didn't reserve that space. This has completely changed, and we came at it. We originally were very strong in the room booking piece, where booking a room is very classic in the enterprise space, because those are resources that are limited. So you want to reserve them and use them accordingly. Desk was not the case, but around July last year, one of the big tech companies on the West Coast came over and said, hey, we're going back to the office in December. We need a tool to reserve desks because we're going full hot desk. help us out, and we started understanding what were the requirements and build a product to address that. And the first thing we realized is you can't just build a product to book a desk. It needs, like you described, Andrew, part of a bigger user journey. And it starts by informing your users on when is the office opening, when do you have access to that building, what are the processes, what are the requirements you need to comply to, and then you reserve the space. And what kind of space am I looking for? A desk, a collaboration space, a room, what technology do I need on that desk, and so forth. And so it's that whole user journey that you need to deliver in an app that the user can use from their phone, their tablet, their desktop, and have that consistent experience. Because if it's a mobile app only and you don't have it on your desktop, or the opposite way, it doesn't work. You can't also expect 10,000 employees to go and download a native app on a BYOD. I mean, we've been pushing employees to buy their own phone, and then we're telling them you've got to install this app to go. So we had to think differently. So we came up with this idea that the first app was a web app. You could run it on your browser on any device, and you don't need to install anything. And employees felt better about that. And we started seeing a higher user adoption just because you didn't have to go to an app store and download the app. Then the second thing we saw is when you get to the workplace, you need to have that consistent experience. And so the devices, the digital assets that are in your workplace need to support that return to the office and that reservation that you made. So devices on the desk, in front of the meeting room, inside the meeting room, at the reception desk, they all need to provide that experience to help you find your destination, and have an experience where when you're getting to that resource, you're actually checking in, confirming that you have reserved the space and that you have arrived on time. Otherwise, your resource may be canceled. And then digging further with bigger customers, they told us that because of the pandemic, they had seen a huge adoption in the enterprise messaging apps. Again, companies who were looking to migrate from Skype to Teams over a period of 3 years suddenly fast-tracked that and got that done in 6 months and had 100,000 users on Teams or WebEx or Slack. And those apps are where we live. I live in those apps all day long. And so I kind of expect that all my reservation data, all my call to action pops up there. And so having all those notifications popping into Slack or WebEx or Teams or Workplace at the right time of the day to remind you that you need to confirm a checkpoint or that you need to get to your reservation is really important. I think that consistency across the three, the employee app, the workplace devices, and the apps that you run on your phone or your desktop every day is what will really make this a successful return to the office.
Absolutely. I definitely think that flexibility is really important. BYOD is always a difficult proposition for those applications. So I'm definitely seeing that as well. On the collaboration piece of this, I think one of the things that's often overlooked in organizations is, yes, the collaboration tools like Teams and WebEx and so forth are really important for enabling us to work in a remote setting. There are clearly some gaps with that as well, and I think those are going to be exacerbated even more when people do return to the office. And what I'm hearing about today is that more of these immersive design, creative-oriented forms of collaboration are the ones that can suffer in either an all remote environment or in a hybrid work environment. So what do I mean by that? Maybe it's a designer that's designing a new look of a product. It's an engineer that's trying to visualize how a specific part is going to function. Maybe it's someone working in IT that's trying to figure out, okay, what does our new cloud architecture really look like, and trying to do that work with someone else and visualize that along someone else is a very difficult proposition, especially in remote work, but also increasingly in hybrid work. Imagine people having access to things like whiteboards in the physical office. How do I get people outside of that office to go and collaborate with them? And so what we're hearing a lot from clients is what tools can help us structure meetings and design types of exercises, brainstorming exercises in better ways. Some of that is digital whiteboard capabilities. We've seen a huge increase in those types of tools. particularly in manufacturing firms. I remember GE Digital was one of the first companies to really go all in on a digital whiteboard type of solution. They are also thinking about tools that can help them better structure things like meetings, for instance. One of the things that happens in a hybrid work meeting, which can really lead to things like burnout for the remote participants, is that they feel like they're not necessarily part of that meeting experience, right? And so there are new tools coming out from the underlying video conferencing players that could say, give everybody a minute of speaking time per meeting and have that structured, send out an automatic transcript after, so that people understood what was happening, and allow us to structure a voting process so that we can make a decision in a meeting with all of the participants regardless of where they're located, right? And so there are two major trends here. One is, can I get more design, creative, brainstorming types of capabilities that I can extend digitally across all those locations? And then can I get a more structured meeting experience to provide more of that equitable experience for the remote workers when they're collaborating in office? And so the collaboration component is a huge category in and of its own. I mean, you could have a full webinar just on that topic alone, but it's definitely one of the major areas that we're seeing frequently talked about. How do I get people to be more digitally savvy, more collaborative with the tools that we have? And it needs to be more than just video conferencing. It needs to extend to more advanced types of collaboration as well. So that's one of the big unknowns, is organizations going down that path, and what tools do they need to really make sure that that experience is excellent when they do return to the office and operate in a hybrid way.
Yeah, and that adds a whole new opportunity for us as well. We've been working with collaboration vendors for a long time, integrating on hardware inside the meeting room, inside collaboration space, leveraging the native touch capabilities of device to allow employees to interact. But really, the last 12 months, we focused mainly on, once again, integrating with the apps that work with those collaboration products. Because like you say, whiteboarding is now coming to your app, it's coming to your desktop. You don't necessarily need to be on a physical device in the workplace. So we're seeing this as an opportunity. What we noticed is, pre-pandemic, it was really the organization communicating to the audience, to the employees. And during the pandemic, it changed, and employees wanted to communicate back to the organization, back to their teams or to other individuals. And so a lot of our focus has been around enabling this concept of team communication and employee communication, where from your phone, you can also share information back and do that just by uploading a picture, giving a post like you do in the social platforms, but doing it in a more secured way to a group of users that are part of your team. So we focused a lot around that, safety and security, making sure that we use the adoption of those collaboration apps to provide increased safety and security, important notifications where needed, and so forth. On the device side, I think we saw a shift 3 years ago where users going into the office were expecting the same experience they had at home. And at home, no one watches linear TV anymore. We all watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or Apple TV. And we have this idea that we're going to watch content that is presented to us based on our persona and what we like. And we're just selecting to view the content we want on the device of our choice. And so we came up with that same concept, and we built that corporate IPTV world where, from a collaboration endpoint like this one, you can select the content that you want to view, whether it's video, whether it's just announcement, whether it's live data feeds, and you can just consume. So if you're a salesperson, you can see your Salesforce dashboard. If you're a customer service, you can watch your Jira tickets, and you can consume that content in an on-demand experience rather than just linear content that's played back. So I think that those collaboration solutions that companies are rolling out are going to give customers an opportunity to also go one step further in the communication side of the employee experience, and just give much more autonomy for the employee to share content and consume content on any device at any time in the day.
Awesome. So our final area here is inspiration, and then we're going to go to the best practice. This is one of the harder ones out there because you're talking about kind of the highest level of employee engagement. And really the idea here is, how do I start facilitating a better culture and have people kind of connected to that culture? And so there are a variety of different tools out there as well. Some of the things that we've been hearing more about have been things like digital signage, providing recognition for employees that are doing great work in the office and kind of showcasing that. That's been around for quite some time, as the Appspace community knows. But also things like having more kind of personalization at desks, making it very clear that that person is part of that overall company culture. And so we are definitely seeing much more of a focus on kind of building that culture with a lot of these technologies, as we start thinking about maximizing employee engagement in that return to work. And Thomas has a lot of really good examples of what Appspace is doing here as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the topics that excite me the most. I think technologically speaking, there is an opportunity really to transform the user experience. And I'll take two industry examples. If you reserve a hotel today, you're going to use a tool like booking.com or hotel, or even your hotel app like Bonvoy, sorry, and you're just going to go ahead and go through that process of reserving a room. That's the reservation part of the tool, and that works well, and we've really matured there. But then when you enter your room, what's the experience? And if you book a room through Bonvoy and you go to the Marriott and you enter the room, normally the TV will have your name on it and welcoming you back and sharing the number of points you've had for being a loyal guest and so forth. Well, why would the experience be different if I'm going back into the office? And so we're leveraging the two aspects of our product: employee communication, which is digital signage, employee comes on a mobile app, that's content, we know that, and then space reservation. And when I'm reserving a desk, I'm not only reserving the desk, the space, I'm also reserving the digital asset on the desk. And a lot of companies are deploying smarter devices on the desk. When I arrive and my reservation starts at 8:30 in the morning, it's not just a black screen saying hello, it's actually my content. So if you look on the picture on the left there, you've got an art picture, you've got a picture of a cat, you've got the quotes you like. When you move to the hot desk, all of that is gone. And that's not a very exciting opportunity for an employee to go back into the office to go to that. But if you combine the technology that the companies have invested with and you add the content to it, now you have an even improved experience where your pictures are rotating, your quotes are rotating, but your corporate information is there as well, your safety and security information. That's the personalization of the space. That is a space I'm more likely to want to go back to. And then when my day is over and I check out of my reservation, the screen defaults back to its core experience. Now that's on the user side. On the team side, it's even better. If I'm reserving a space, a neighborhood in the building and selecting 10 desks for my colleagues, I may also browse the available digital assets that are there, digital signs or video endpoints, and reserve those. Not the full airtime of those, but the airtime the administrator has allocated for reservation. So maybe now I get 50% of the airtime during my reservation for those digital signs. And if I'm part of sales, I have my Salesforce dashboard that's on the screen, not only corporate messaging. I think that's truly transformational. That's making the workplace experience even better than pre-pandemic. And from a simple user experience, you still have that feeling that it's personal and not something for everyone. So a lot of opportunity there, I think, to help get users get excited by that return to the office instead of afraid and worried that they're losing all the benefits they had in the past.
Absolutely. Thank you, Thomas. So I think what we'll do now is go through our best practices here. We have 5 best practices total. And so we're going to go through these fairly quickly, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience as well to ask whatever you like here. So we have 5 best practices I mentioned here for hybrid work that we want to leave you with, and kind of 5 key categories really that you want to think about as you go forward and start to bring some of these technologies into the workplace. The first is around user adoption. We do think you need to help employees understand sort of the value of new technologies. And I think what really stands out to me here, Thomas, you mentioned something really interesting, which was just, you know, that fundamental shift from having this super personalized space to, you know, having something that can feel a little bit, you know, more standardized. That can have, you know, impacts on my overall employee engagement. And so understanding that particular area of resistance and doing the research up front is going to be critical to making sure that you drive that user adoption. So if you understand and you do the research up front, maybe you conduct a employee journey mapping session and you bring 10 employees together and ask them about their workplace experience. If you're able to understand that, hey, this person's going to be really upset if they don't have their personal photos, their plants, and all their gym equipment with them at their desk, then you can start to plan for that. And maybe, let's say you have dedicated lockers instead, and you're able to say, okay, you're not going to have that at your desk, but you could have that in a locker that we provide to you elsewhere. And so user adoption really is about doing that research up front. Thomas, curious of your perspective on user adoption as well.
Yeah, so certainly that is a huge one, Andrew. And the other one I think is awareness. Being confident starts with being aware and understanding what you're going into. So communicating to employees, educating employees is important. So we really see it as there's three pillars. The pillar of awareness: communicate, inform your employees, this is what's going to happen, this is what you're going back into, this is the good and the change. Then educate, train your users to use the tools. If they know how to use the tools, they'll feel confident and they'll use. If they don't, it's like a new app that you install. Until you actually know how to use it, you don't want to go to it, and that's the problem. So educating is important, and then you've got the tool to do all the things that you need to do to be successful. So user adoption comes with communication, and there it's really around awareness and education. I think really important to be successful.
Great point, absolutely. Consolidation was another one that we came up with as well, which is just creating that consistent experience across locations and technologies. A lot of the organizations I talk to frequently will say, you know, I had 8, you know, hubs essentially before the pandemic, and now we have 5,000 because our employees are all working in these different locations. It makes it really difficult for employees to really focus on their most important work when that information is sprawling across multiple apps, channels, new technologies. So the more that you can integrate that, as Thomas was mentioning earlier, around kind of the various integrations across all of those different collaboration tools, for instance, the more of a consistent experience that you can provide across that entire workforce, the better off you're going to be. And so as you go and think about these tools, you definitely want to do a bit of an inventory beforehand to say, okay, what do we have right now as far as existing infrastructure? How are these tools going to integrate? And then, you know, how do we kind of bring them together in a very consistent experience so that no matter where I am, whether I'm at home, whether I'm at the office in Europe or in North America, I'm having that same experience across the board. And so difficult thing to do, but one that we're increasingly seeing customers really focus on.
Yeah, I think we hear a lot of CIOs reaching out saying, hey, we want to consolidate multiple point products to reduce costs. Now the challenge, the opportunity is even different than cost. It's not so much cost. It's really, by consolidating, can I improve the experience? So pre-pandemic, you had software for visitor management, software for room booking, software for employee communication, software for kiosk wayfinding, and for digital signage, and they were all point products. And the problem when you have point products is they don't communicate one with the other. They don't allow you to leverage all those endpoints you have, whether they're on users' devices, on workplace devices. When you consolidate everything, you actually have huge advantages. An example is, if my visitor management and my room scheduling panel and my desk panel and my user's device is all managed from a single system, when I want to blast an emergency message, I can do that from a single system and push it out, and it reaches every user or every device that's connected to that platform. So that's a huge benefit. It also helps on scale. When we were doing room booking, we were talking about deployments of 6,000 rooms in a big customer. Now we're talking about 100,000 desks that you need to operate. So I think consolidating point products allows you to address that scale once and not multiple times, and that definitely helps CIOs in their objectives to deploy technology very rapidly.
Absolutely, it's getting even more complex. With safety and security, I think our primary best practice is that you need to think about this first. I think there are a lot of organizations that feel like they're closer to the return to the office, and then all of a sudden they push out that return to the office another 6 months. And so safety, and security continue to be the paramount concern out there. From my perspective, if I look at the employee engagement surveys that we've done, psychological safety is one of the major things that impacts someone's ability to be productive and innovative at work. If you're not able to provide that, there's really no point in bringing them back. And so this is the major point that you need to think about, I think, first as you go, thinking about these various technologies. Can I get that foundational piece? And from there, I can start building more of those advanced technologies on top.
Yeah, for me, it all links back to consolidation. If I say, instead of working with point products that work in silo, if you consolidate into a single platform, you leverage that as an opportunity to increase safety and security. And I think it's the biggest opportunity out there that companies have. And I think the platform is there to support that consolidation and simplify how you manage safety and security across your workplace.
An improved experience, we also think that you need to develop a way to track progress. For instance, we looked at our recent survey, and only 34% of decision makers said that they were collecting feedback around the employee experience, which is kind of astounding if you think about it. They're just kind of operating, with no, sense of where they're at and where they're going. And so we recommend having a very strong employee listening program that you implement at the beginning of this process, basically as soon as you possibly can. And that enables you to track progress against these goals. So you can understand, okay, this desk booking tool is really driving a lot of satisfaction. Here are maybe the areas that I need to improve, et cetera, et cetera. And so even using that for some of the safety components up front is something I've seen quite frequently with customers. But if you want to have that improved experience, I think you also need to measure that experience going forward.
No, I think you're right, Andrew. And again, in the consumer space, it's common. If you use Airbnb or all those apps, when you make a reservation, you always get prompt and ask, hey, did you like the experience? Was it easy to do the reservation? Did you think the response time was quick? You have to do the same when your users are using the app, and you don't want to do that in another app. You want to do that in the same app. And in reality, it's what we started with. It's like checkpoints. I do a checkpoint answering a COVID questionnaire before coming in the office. Once I'm in the office and I end my reservation, I get prompt, hey, did you like your experience? Did you like the workspace you were at? Did it have everything you needed for you to be productive and happy at work? So I think leverage the app that you're deploying to your users to track feedback from that app directly. And then that correlated with the analytics that you have in the platform gives you a really good understanding of whether or not you're really delivering the improved experience your employees need.
Totally. And our final one is around scalability. Ensure that these tools can be rolled out quickly. I mean, this is one of the fastest transitions, I think, technology-wise, that we've seen organizations adopting these new tools to rapidly get ready for the return to work. For me, there's a couple of things that really pop out as being really important. One is the importance of cloud and enabling cloud-like solutions that can easily scale across whatever cloud provider you're using, that can go to a global multinational type of organization and be able to roll that out really quickly. We're seeing less of a focus on kind of the traditional on-prem tools. There's a lot of hooking into those tools for sure that exist, but for rapid scalability, we are seeing more of a focus on cloud. And then we've mentioned it so many times, but just usability. The more user testing and the easier it is for those employees to use those tools, the easier it's going to be to scale that and drive that adoption really quickly.
Yeah, I think cloud, I think the need for constant adaptability because of the requirements that keep changing are forcing companies that were more traditional to adopt cloud now. And that's exciting for companies who've supported cloud for so many years to finally see those big guys, the big banks, the governments say, okay, we're going cloud, because if we go on-prem, we just can't keep up with the requirements the updates are just too slow. So I think cloud there is definitely the way to go, and that's exciting for many companies to finally do that transition.
All right, so there you have it, 5 best practices here. We have 5 minutes left in the webinar now. What we'd like to do is open it up for Q&A for anybody that has questions. And just as a reminder, there is a chat box as well at the bottom.
So.
All right. Hi, Andrew, Thomas. Thank you for that. That was super insightful. A lot of information to take in the last hour. We did have some questions come in, and I'm just going to pose it out there, and then one of you can pick up. Heard a lot about user adoption of workplace technology. Any strategies to help get our users interested in and educated on the tech we're adding to the office?
That's a great question. You know, one of the things that I've recommended as a best practice for quite some time is having employee champions that sit within a line of business that can go and take that new technology and say, okay, for my finance colleagues, and I work in finance, here's how this particular technology applies and makes our lives better in finance. And so that's one of the major best practices and things that I do see driving better adoption is if you do have someone boots on the ground that can go and help out with that, you know, driving adoption and really showing the value of that to users that are like them.
Yeah, I want to add to that because I think it's a great question. Before the pandemic, when we were engaging with a customer would run a POC, and a POC would be very limited validating the technology. Companies no longer have the time to do that, so they pick a technology based on one they feel is right, but they still run POCs, but they run POCs at scale for champions. So we have companies that will run a POC for 500 or 5,000 employees, make those power users, and then release it out. And when they pick the users, they pick them across business units, across seniority level, just to make sure that they have a range of champions that can really promote the adoption of the technology when it's ready to go live. And those POCs are short. They're 30 days, 60 days max, because again, there is no time to go for a 6 months deployment. It has to go fast. But I think that your point, Andrew, is spot on. It's really that idea of power users and champions that will promote.
Another question that came in, and I think this might be for you, Thomas. Are there any use cases that you can share from your customers or clients in terms of how they are using technology like Appspace to improve the flexible working experience?
Well, I think we covered a lot today around that and what possibilities exist for companies. I don't think we have a single customer that doesn't see that platform as the opportunity for them. I don't think we see any customer buying Appspace for just one feature of the product or the platform. They see the ability to leverage every aspect of the platform as a way to be more successful and improve the workplace experience. So room scheduling, desk scheduling, kiosk, digital signage, the employee app, all of those are extremely critical to be successful and to improve that. And where we started with companies in digital signage 10 years ago, they're now adopting all the features of the platform and leveraging that. And new customers coming on board are immediately grabbing the opportunity they have in leveraging all of it. It doesn't mean that Appspace does it all. We work and partner with IWMS providers and other hardware vendors to deliver the experience. But I think that's what we're really seeing is leverage the platform, don't go for a point product.
And I think we'll take one more. Let me see. We haven't really started planning for a post-COVID future as an organization because it seems that could be in the more distant future than we thought. Where should my organization start in terms of planning and evaluating technology? Andrew, you've been working on this since 2017. What are your thoughts?
So I think the first thing is an assessment of what you have already. You know, what are the technologies that you have already? Getting perspective from your workforce as far as how is that helping them be productive, better collaborate with their colleagues, maintain their safety, as we mentioned, was a foundational requirement here. So I think that's a combination of one, an assessment of what you have, inventory that, and then really start to get that employee listening program up front. And that will tell you where are your gaps right now, and then where do you need to go from there. At the end of the day, if you can focus on your employees and really focus on what they need on a day-to-day basis, you're going to be much better off than just kind of making decisions, you know, outside of their purview. And so that would be my major recommendation: is continue to be very employee-centric, and that will guide you along the right way.
And I think that brings us to the top of the hour. So we hit our 60-minute mark today. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.